this was attributed to a tough economic environment.
Well there, good morning. We begin our program this morning with some pictures from Huruma there, where 2 people have been confirmed dead following the collapse of a 5-story building in Huruma slum, that is in Nairobi. And the building located in Gay area is said to have collapsed at about 1:30 a.m. So far, 4 people have been rescued alive, with one of the 2 who died succumbing to injuries while being rushed to hospital. Those are pictures coming our way from Huruma slum, where such a rescue operation is still ongoing. We have our reporters on the ground. They're going to give us an update whatsoever coming out of Huruma. Remember, this is not the first building that has collapsed in that area. This is the second, or I believe the third. So, of course, investigations are still ongoing. We have our reporters once again on the ground. They're going to give us details about that. And I'm getting a new report that now the number of the dead have increased from 2 to 3 rescue operations. As you can see, they're still ongoing. And 4 people have been rescued so far, and they've been rushed to various hospitals around there. According to the National Disaster Management Unit, a multi-agency rescue team has resolved to demolish one of the temporary structures located near the collapsed building to pave way for equipment being used in the operation. But they have issues with accessibility. You can see there it's a very crowded area, so they're trying to make sure that they get ample space to give them an easy time during the rescue operation. So far, reports we're getting is that 3 people have been confirmed dead, 4 have been rescued, but rescue operation is still ongoing there in Huruma. I'm going to link up with our reporters who are still trying to gather crucial information onto what exactly caused the collapse of that building in question in Huruma, that is in Nairobi County. Once again, this is the Sunday edition right here on KTN News. It is Sunday, of course, the 3rd day of June 2018. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. A very good morning. But for now, before we start making sense out of all the political development that has taken place in this past week, let me start with the political pages first. There's some interesting headlines here on the Sunday Standard. Let me begin with this splash, which says, emboldened with opposition leader Raila Odinga now fully backing his agenda. President Uhuru has launched a cleanup targeting the corrupt and non-performers that is in government, setting stage for a major reshuffle that could go up to cabinet level. And the writer here goes on saying that there are about 4 cabinet secretaries will be targeted during this reshuffle. And on the splash, it's being indicated that Raila's hand might be in the looming reshuffle. Of course, this comes after that famous handshake that, of course, went over into hugs and extended handshakes to both deputies. That is now William Ruto and Kalonzo Musyoka. There you go. That is what we have on the splash this morning on the Sunday Standard. And they're saying change knocking, foundation laid for reorganization of government. This follows, several cases of corruption, NYS, NCPB, the Kenya pipeline. I mean, the list is endless. And they're saying, number 1, president commits accounting offices to a rigorous vetting exercise that is expected to weed out most of them to create space for newcomers. So far, about 65 state corporations are without boards of directors. In studio with me, we have our guest. We have Dismas Mukua, we have Mark Bichachi, as well as Hesbon Owila. We do expect Kipchumba Karui to join us any moment from now. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let me begin with Dismas there, who's on the far end. Dismas, you can see the reorganization here, the restructuring in government. What do you read in this?
Well, the anti-corruption fight, the buck stops with President Kenyatta. So whatever he needs to do to ensure that corruption disappears from our face is highly welcome. But there are 3 questions at play which we may need to ask first. Number 1, the president has got a unique opportunity to kill corruption today, because majority of the people who are accused of participating in corruption or architects of corruption, in fact, are his direct appointees. So if he suspects a number of these cabinet secretaries or principal secretaries are engaged in corruption, at their pleasure, anytime you can ask them to go home. And we should run away from the business of asking people to step aside to pave way for investigation. If they're going to resign, let them resign. If they're going to be fired, let them be fired straight away. That is the first issue.
Yeah.
Then the second issue is the success rate in Kenya on prosecution is very worrying. Because from the time we attained independence in 1963, we are told that our resources are stolen every single day. I mean, the Auditor General indicates that we lose up to 500 billion annually going to corruption. And if you make a comparison so that it makes sense, Rwanda's budget is 258 billion, essentially meaning that the money that goes to corruption in Kenya can run Rwanda for two financial years, 2 years. Now, how come, with the full knowledge that money in fact is lost, there's nobody spending time behind bars? There's nobody who's been jailed. And we need to look at a good example. There's a fella called Jolly Nyame, a governor in Nigeria, who's been jailed for stealing an equivalent of 1.2 billion Kenyan shillings. The case lasted for 10 years, but eventually the governor, 10 good years in Nigeria. But eventually the governor is behind bars.
Yeah.
Now, my unsolicited advice to President Kenyatta is to invite all the guys who are responsible for investigations and prosecutions and zoom in to only 12 suspects. You get these 4 cabinet secretaries who are suspected of engaging in corruption. You get 4 principal secretaries and 4 governors. So that you deploy all the resources, so that even if you achieve 50% success rate, then we have 2 cabinet secretaries today serving time. You have 2 governors.
And I think that will serve as a good example.
That will be a good example.
Yes, let me engage Mark. And Mark, it seems we're not going to avoid this depressing topic with regards to corruption. And apparently on the splash here, the standard says 65 state corporations are without board of directors, 30 parastatals are without substantive chief executive officer, and 4 cabinet secretaries out of the 22 are perhaps going to be on the chopping board. Do you think this is the right step towards, right direction for the president and his administration?
I think the president has no choice in this matter. He has to take decisive action, and that decisive action has to be quite radical if it's to be taken seriously by the Kenyan public. Let's also remember that there are 2 kinds of reasons to be fired. You can be fired for commission. In other words, you were part of the corrupt cartel. But you can also be fired for omission, that you were in office and you refused to do anything to stop these cartels. And that is what the CSs and PSs can be found culpable of, not in terms of the law, but in terms of basic hiring and firing regulations. I'll give you an example. If today the Standard Group had a watchman standing at the gate and one of the cars of the Standard Group motorcade was stolen, would that watchman still have the job, whether it can be proven he was part of the conspiracy to steal or not? The fact that you're hired to protect public money and you fail to do so, in my mind, is reason enough for you to be fired. And therefore the president, in even his speech on Madaraka Day, when he talks about lie detector tests, the tests and revetting of these particular individuals, it is something that he has to do. And let's understand, the kind of corruption we have in this country is abnormal. It's as if zeros after a number mean nothing in this country. We will steal until the cows come home. And therefore, the only way and the only option the president has is to perform radical surgery when it comes to his cabinet, his appointees in both parastatals, directorships, and PSs and CSs, to make sure the kind of people he gets there are not only people who are pure in their intent, but who are also focused on stopping corruption. Because if he's able to stop corruption, we will save 600 billion a year. That, my friend, is 60 Thika roads across this country.
That's
so we need to be, it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money. So we need to be very clear that the president needs to be supported to do as radical surgery as possible.
Hesbon, most people have been accusing the president of being silent. That was before Monday last week. He has now broken his silence and he has made a statement in a very big way. Do you think this is worth it? And do you think it's going to help, the government in fighting what they're calling the corruption dragon? I think corruption has a lot of titles in this country. Let me just go with dragon for now.
Yeah, well, I think there's been a call for some action from the government, and the response by the government probably to a large extent, from where I see it, is populist in a way, and which is not a bad thing, because if they continue with this kind of purge and corruption and give us full disclosure of everything that they're doing, and we see the due process followed until termination of cases where people are either convicted or acquitted, then it would be a good thing. But if we just have this pomposity and the dropping of big names, I think corruption is not about who is in what position. Corruption is about the act. It's a vice that we need to deal with divorced from individuals. So whether you are a PS, CS, or whatever you are, if you are corrupt, you're corrupt. So dropping big names may not be the key thing. And again, it should be done in such a way that it is discriminate enough to just pick out on individuals who are corrupt rather than picking out individuals who will set an example. Because why set an example with an individual who probably is not corrupt? And what I think I need to echo what Mark has said, that the investigation should be such that ultimately we know when somebody is arraigned in court, are they arraigned for an error of commission, in which case they are accomplices in corrupt activities, or they are arraigned for an error of omission, in which case they knew that it was going on, but they did absolutely nothing. Yet, the public has vested them, with that power to protect the public resources and, of course, use the public resources judiciously, to help the public. So it's a tricky ground for the president, and I think it's a good thing that he has a political goodwill from Kenyans, and of course, the
opposition as well.
Raila Odinga is also on board.
And speaking about Raila Odinga disperse, the statement by President Uhuru goes like this: is saying that he's going to firmly and decisively deal with the corrupt individuals in government. This statement comes right after the national prayer meeting, where we saw the handshakes translating into hugs, and of course they extended the handshakes to the two deputies as well. Do you see the hand of Raila Odinga in this?
Well, Raila has got a serious political capital, but in the corruption fight, the buck stops with President Kenyatta. He does not need anybody's goodwill to fight corruption in Kenya. He's the president of the Republic of Kenya. The buck stops with him. He's a symbol of national unity, and his word is law, whether or not Raila accepts it or any other political player. But the question we need to ask ourselves as we discuss this corruption, does the president in fact have the appetite or the desire to kill corruption in Kenya? And if he does, how come we're seeing token efforts to fight corruption? Like, for instance, there are people right now who are claiming that Kenyans are developing immunity against corruption news. That every single day you wake up in the morning, there's a scandal at NYS. The following day, National Cereals and Produce Board. The following day, Kenya Pipeline Corporation. The following day, Kenya Power. The following day, National Irrigations and Produce Board. Others are beginning to form the view that all these things we are seeing being taken by the DCI and the Anti-Corruption Commission is merely to prepare Kenyans for the bad news. Because right now, as Mark has indicated, if a fella is stealing $1 million bob, then nobody's surprised. The figures have now jumped to $1 billion. If you're stealing anything less than $1 billion, people will even give you a beating in the village where you're coming from. You are going to be told there is a poor effort. But now these guys who are stealing billions, and there is evidence. The Auditor General has confirmed times above number, man has been stolen. But there's nobody spending time behind bars. That's the big question. Is the president sufficiently annoyed to bang tables and ask all the relevant agencies to go to State House for a meeting and find a way out? And is the new DPP, has he been given the right resources? Does he have enough investigators? Does he have enough prosecutors? Because a few days ago, Nuruddin Haji was complaining that a majority of the prosecutors under his agency have found more exciting jobs at the judiciary or elsewhere. So they're moving out in truckloads. So how do we expect to fight corruption in Kenya if the DPP does not have sufficient resources? And then on the same note, yesterday I saw the majority leader at the National Assembly, the Honorable Duale, saying they're going to give these agencies necessary resources. Why didn't this happen yesterday? If you speak to guys who work for the Anti-Corruption Commission, never mind the track record of success is almost zero. But if you speak to guys who work at Haji's department, they say they don't have enough resources. The prosecutors are yawning away because for them, when they wake up in the morning, instead of coming up with a strategy for prosecution, they're looking for jobs elsewhere. Why can't we give the DPP the necessary resources? And why can't the president fire anybody he suspects. Because, you know, the president has got absolute powers. Most public servants in Kenya serve at his pleasure. And he's supposed to ensure that everybody in his cabinet is like Caesar's wife, beyond reproach. When your cabinet secretary or your principal secretary or ambassador is mentioned, even in passing, please send them home, do quick investigations. If the fella is innocent, then he can be deployed elsewhere. If we don't do that, then we'll be waking up every single day, being treated to 1 billion being lost, and we start asking ourselves as a nation, why are we not making progress?
Yeah, I see Esbon seems to disagree with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, we need to tread carefully. When people are mentioned and you send them home, then you're breeding a culture of you know, malicious targeting, that I could be very innocent, but if by mentioning my name, my enemy will have me fired and my career destroyed,
That's a wrong
then
approach.
that's a wrong approach. And that's why it's important that when people are mentioned, they are given the benefit of doubt, the due process, and the law in Kenya is very clear. You are innocent until proved guilty. And I think we have enough resources, enough agencies to do the investigation. And if the president and the powers that be have the goodwill to fight corruption, they should let these investigative agencies do the job of investigation.
Yeah, and speaking about investigative agencies, Mark, as you react to Hezbon's comment there, apparently the majority in the National Assembly, Eden Duale, says Parliament is ready to enact fresh laws to help fight runaway corruption. He talks about giving agencies more powers. Do we have agencies that lack powers? Do we lack law? I mean,
what we've lacked in this country is not necessarily laws. It is agencies that have been lax and lazy in pursuing their work. Let's understand that if you're going to fight corruption, if you look at any jurisdiction that has fought corruption, to begin with, you've got to be able to stick your neck out. You've got to be able to put your life and limb on the line for the sake of God and country. That's the kind of people we need. If Webukala today, sitting at Integrity Center, considers his life too valuable, then he cannot fight corruption in this country.
And he's been very silent.
Exactly. So the reality of the matter is this. If this country is going to move out of corruption, we've got to make extraordinary moves. And let me tell you something, this is a war. And let's just be very, very honest. In the war on graft, there'll be people who are innocent, who will be shot by the bullet of justice. We wish them all the best that that does not happen to them, but it will. I can guarantee you
This is
why
the collective damage everybody talks about.
Because there'll be people who are caught by association. Let me ask a question. If you work in the procurement department, okay, and you are in the office, and then someone managed to access your computer and approved a payment, you understand? From your desk, you will be sentenced. And that, by the way, is a good thing. It's a good thing because now you have to focus on your job and become whistleblower number one. What my problem is with this country, we steal 600 billion every year. How many whistleblowers do we have since John Githongo? We have too few because people are sitting in their offices, they're watching corruption happen, and they're not willing to risk for the sake of their country to tell us what is going on. So if you're in that particular space and you did not whistleblow, that's going to be an issue. The second thing that worries me about this country, if you're going to hold a case against the corrupt, you need to be able to have people who are willing to do plea bargains. In other words, I received 60 million. It was Dismas who approved it. I have phone conversations. Can you reduce my sentence to 1 year, but I'll give you evidence against Dismas. That is how you win these cases. That is what we need to see.
Dismas, I'm going to come to you. Let me give Hezbon a right of reply.
Yes.
And Mark talks about this. He has an interesting narrative here. He's calling this some sort of a war on graft. There might be collective, damage.
Well, I understand what Mark is saying, and I understand the magnitude of what corruption is doing to this country. But we cannot reduce the war on corruption to witch hunt, because that is exactly what Mark is saying. We cannot condemn people in the court of public opinion and just say that because maybe somebody had access to your profiles and did something. then you are culpable. We need to understand to what extent were you an accomplice. No, let me just explain.
Let him finish.
Yes, we need to understand to what extent was I an accomplice in my profile being used as a conduit to corruption. And that is the work of investigators. I'm a good student of Immanuel Kant, and Immanuel Kant talks about the categorical imperative, that we must do that which can be universalized as the right thing. So I don't think the right thing is somebody can come to my...
Esbon, we are losing 600 billion shillings every year.
And that's what I'm saying.
Don't you think Kenyans have a right to be angry?
No, let me tell you, we cannot be casual about this thing. We cannot be casual and say that any other name that is mentioned is corrupt. We need to be very diligent and understand to what extent are they corrupt so that we understand that this is how money has been stolen. Look at NYS 1, for instance, Engineer Mangiti. We understand very well that he was acquitted, but we see the process that he was actually at the beginning being touted as a suspect. But the investigative agencies cleared him, and we see the role that he played in trying to mitigate.
Finally, the sentence...
And that's what I'm saying. Yes, now, you know, a career is destroyed because somebody just mentioned himself. Yet, we have investigative agencies. I'm not saying that the fight against corruption is not a serious thing. It is a serious thing, and it must be done seriously, not through which hand.
Let's understand something.
Yes.
Just 30 seconds before we go to this one.
Yes.
There's a guy 3 years ago. He was the head of the IMF, I believe, okay? And someone, a lady in a hotel said he was guilty of molesting her, okay? He stepped down, lost his job, and then it was later found out that she was lying, completely lying. But here's what I mean by collateral damage. I do not mean that person is culpable. What I mean is when that broom comes sweeping, it will sweep you out too. That is the reality. If you've ever run your business and you find...
The broom must be anchored on investigation.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Let him finish.
Investigation. But let me tell you, if you're going to fight the war on graft, there will be collateral damage, whether we like it or not.
Do you think there will be collateral damage at this war on graft?
Obviously, there will be collateral damage.
So you're in agreement with Mark here?
I'm in agreement, but on the general principle, those are the details. But the president has got the unique opportunity to speak with the Chief Justice and agree that we have anti-corruption courts working, say, on a 24-hour basis. That if you've stolen public resources today, the case shouldn't be like the Nigerian one, which is going to be determined in 10 years' time. Or like the ones we saw recently, which take, days, years on end.
Or even NYS 1, where we didn't see a single conviction.
Yeah, it didn't happen. So the question is, if you're a top public servant, you're a cabinet secretary, you're a principal secretary, or the chairman of a parastatal or a managing director, the moment there's overwhelming evidence, either by acts of omission or commission, that you've not taken care of our resources, the president has got a lot of assets and resources at his disposal. He can deploy the NIS guys to give him an opinion whether, in fact, you may have not been found guilty by a court of law, but they can look on the probability of evidence. Have you actually stolen somebody's goat? Have you stolen somebody's cow? Have you failed to take care of the resources? Then on that basis, the president can politely ask you to resign. But on the flip side, if the president wants to be extreme, next time he's appointing any public officer, when they're signing the acceptance letter, they should be signing a resignation letter. So the moment he suspects that a particular cabinet secretary has engaged in mischief, then all he needs to do is that today I've accepted the resignation of XYZ so that we pave way for investigations. But most important, the president must identify and crush corruption cartels. Because Governor Sonko claims there are cartels within the Nairobi county is unable to deliver. And the president says there are corruption cartels everywhere. So we in Kenya stands the best position of establishing those corruption cartels. It's President Kenyatta. Why can't he crush those corruption cartels? He's got the intelligence, he's got the political capital, he's got everything. And more important, he's got a legacy to defend. So why can't President Kenyatta today lose his cool, and then from tomorrow we see those cartels crumbling down?
Mark, as you react to that, I think what Kenyans basically want to see are these main people, the big fish or the so-called whales now, or is it dragon? They want to see these people jailed.
There's an elite force, and I'm trying to find it. They were called the Untouchables in the early 20s when they were fighting Al Capone. Let's understand the intrigues of Al Capone. Al Capone, this is almost 100 years later, had billions in today's money stashed in money laundering schemes, okay? This team hunted him down for years, and they were only able to pin him down for tax evasion. Imagine. So this is the kind of war we are talking about. We need to have an elite force that is dogged in their pursuit of justice. We must also have public opinion swing towards them and support them such that we are able, listen, NYS 1, was the money stolen? Yes. But apparently, according to our justice system, it was stolen by ghosts because there's not a single person who was found guilty of anything. Let me tell you what needs to happen in these cases. Some of these people need to be found guilty for not filing tax returns, need to be found guilty of the smallest thing we can find so that there is some form of justice done. That's what we must do. We must pursue justice with united pursuit. And I'll tell you why we need to pursue justice.
Yes.
Do you know if you had 1 billion shillings today, and you spent 50,000 shillings every day for the next 50 years, you still have 14 million shillings to spare left behind. That is how much money we are stealing.
We've lost 9 billion, apparently 9 billion shillings in the NYS 2 scandal. Hesbon, as we finish the first part of this program, we've lost about 2 billion in the NYS 1 scam.
Yes.
With no single conviction. You've talked about the need to follow the rule of law. I mean, doesn't that bother you in any way that we've not seen any single conviction despite losing millions of shillings?
Let me tell you, Ben, Yusuf, the reason why it bothers me, and I'm worried about many Kenyans who think that they are bothered because of the amounts floated, is because increasingly I've come to realize that the corruption issue has become a threat to those who are not corrupt. And if you look at NYS 1 and so many other corruption incidences, you realize that the accusations are increasingly being pointed to figures that are innocent, individuals who are innocent. And that is why you realize that our investigative agencies take them to court and they are acquitted. You know, look at NYS 1 and follow the proceedings in a court of law. And you realize that these guys were obviously innocent to the extent that they were charged on the public opinion. And that's why I'm saying that by mentioning names, there is a sense in which we are being duped. We are being taken to a direction where people will be found innocent, yet the investigation should focus thoroughly on everyone and only pick those ones who are charged on investigations. And that is my point.
So you don't believe in collateral damage?
I don't believe it. I mean, collateral damage...
We will continue, we'll continue with this conversation. Guilty. Of course, it's exactly 27 minutes past the hour. Of course, this is the Sunday edition right on KTN News. We're going to take a very short break, but when we return, we're going to talk about the new DPP in office, Nuruddin Haji, who says that he has enough evidence to nail all the 54 suspects named in the NYS 2 scandal. We'll have that and much more. Stay with us.